boss or your leadership team or whatever is treating you that way, but really you're earning 30 grand a year, you're not going to put up with that. But you give me 30 million, I don't know.
True.
So I think the leadership style has to be contextualized in what the rewards are. Yeah, not just in terms of these abstracts of, winning. I think the financial, absolute concrete financial gains have to be taken into account.
How much do you think as well? Because in the Last Dance, we kind of got the impression that the people who enjoyed practicing with MJ the most were the Olympics teams, the All-Star teams, because they were almost sort of closer to his level. They could challenge him a lot more, and they enjoyed that. And it seems that this whole bullying side of things would have come from the rest of the league almost. Do you think that comes into play in terms of
it's different too. So, like, for example, with my club teams that I've been, the successful club teams that I've played for, winning in Italy and in Spain, you're with them every day. So in terms of how you mediate your communication and how that journey, the shape that journey takes to your ultimate goal is very different to being a tournament team, which is the Great Britain team. It's a 10 days, a 2-week long tournament, and even though you prep all year for it, you'll have camps and everything else. Just those team dynamics aren't going to be the same as your club teams will be. Also, that style of leadership, having a small dose of it, is very different. So, like in the documentary, there's Scott Burrell, and he's literally just riding him daily.
Incessant, isn't it?
Yeah. So that over the course of 10 months, every single day, twice a day, on top of the pressure of performing in a game against other elite athletes, that's a different psyche, different mental toll than if you're Charles Barkley or some of the other guys who came together for 3 weeks before a tournament, where you're overmatching your opponents anyway. The opponents are irrelevant. It's just basically you guys and your friends having a pickup game.
True. So what did you make of the element of Michael Jordan when he would do whatever he had to do to kind of hold those little grudges, to give him that extra 10%? That even like when we heard that when he was making up that story about what was said to him on the court, just so for the next game he could go and absolutely obliterate. Is that like, how would you have dealt with him as an opponent in that sense? Because not many people could, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's the talent as well, right? So like you can have all the kind of tendencies and grudges, but I think him having to consistently find ways to feel slighted has led him to not be satisfied. One thing that really jumped out to me was just how unsatisfied he seemed at the end of it, and I couldn't help but see the kind of comfort level that someone like Kobe Bryant, who very much mirrored Michael in his leadership approach and how he approached the game, but how comfortable he got in the kind of towards the end of his career and post-career before he passed away. Whereas Michael doesn't seem to have let go of that. I can't, nowhere in the documentary did Michael ever even mention Dr. J, or did they cut out, even if it was, how he doesn't win those championships without Dr. J. He doesn't win those things he never said those things. Whereas the bit that you heard about Kobe was instantly, I don't win 5 championships without Jordan. Even though they're both, during their kind of competitive peaks, embodied that same kind of, taking everything as an individual competition stance. Jordan doesn't seem to have ever really grown up out of that, and I don't think that's a good recipe for his well-being himself. I don't think it's necessarily the right way to have sustained well-being.
Do you think it leads to ultimately a very lonely kind of existence in the long run?
Yeah, I think so. It's and as far as confronting that as a competition, I think it's just becomes a case of if you're good enough or not. Like sometimes the talent is just too much. You can, if I was to take a football analogy of Messi and Ronaldo, I have no doubt Messi works just as hard, but Ronaldo's trying to turn every stone, leave nothing unturned. But you confront a guy, and in any other context, Ronaldo may have been unparalleled, the greatest of all time. Mm-hmm. But he just seems to be confronted by this force of Messi that just you can't overcome.
But you need those. Sorry, go on.
The comparison is there, I'm guessing. I think it's just the comparison just has to stick there, and I think the comparison with Ronaldo actually drives him to be at that level. I don't think with Jordan was there really a comparison at that time for the longevity of his career. Was there a comparison for him to say, okay, this guy's doing just as well as I am, that I need to always get better and better? Or I think with Jordan, it was just drilled, focused.
There's a moment in the doc where they talk about Karl Malone winning the MVP, and he just wasn't having it. He just was like, I'm the best player in this league.
Yeah, it was like, all right, you can have the MVP.
He still managed to win the MVP for the final, but he just wasn't satisfied with that. And he's almost, like you say, he felt slighted. Do you think there's a level where he's never satisfied, ever satisfied? And is that something he's taken post career, still not being satisfied?
But you'd have to say that's a human condition, though, wouldn't you? I don't think anybody's really ever satisfied. I think he just took it to the next level, wouldn't you say? Like, if I'm not satisfied, but that means I'm gonna destroy everything in front of me. I'm gonna beat everything in front of me. But there'll still be another thing. There'll still be another challenge. There'll still be another challenge. But he was just driven.
But there's ways of going about it. Like, so I hear what you're saying about the human condition. But there's things which are like the competitive fire that, you know, that clearly burnt really bright in him and still does to a degree. He took things like the MVP award, which is a completely subjective thing. You know, he seemed to need validation at a level. And maybe, you know, in some of the early episodes, they were talking about him not having the validation of his dad because his dad preferred his brother. However he internalized that element, he seemed to want even the subjective validation. It didn't end with, I won the title. Or it didn't end with, like, you know, he was competitive. He wanted to play his security guards with penny on the wall. He wanted to, like, do you know what I mean? So that, that insatiable need, you have to reach a level of comfort in the sense of what is out of your control. And I don't think he ever really has. And it, you know, there's things in there which seem really problematic in terms of, you know, when he spoke about his gambling stuff, he spoke about it in a way that a true gambler would. It just happens to be that he's wealthy enough that it's not a problem. You know?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. See, the way it came across to me was that in terms of like the percentages, it did feel to me like, obviously, if he had a lot less money, possibly it would have been a problem, or maybe he would have put less money on the table. I don't know. But
he bets on everything. Like, he literally bets on everything. Like golf. He didn't bet on his own games, but he would, like I said, like the penny on the wall thing, you know.
And obviously he was just everything.
Blackjack. He was,
and then if you think
going into other people's games. Sorry.
You hear the things he says to justify it in the documentary are like, well, if it was a problem, I'd be selling my house, or I'd be losing my wife, or these are all things that addicts say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, these are like, you know, whatever your addiction is, whatever the, you know, the kind of poison of choice.
Gaz, as a super fan, he kind of knows more about the Jordan story in depth than we do. Just seeing it from documentary. Was the gambling issue a lot deeper than what skimmed across in the documentary?
Yes. I mean, the conspiracy theories, I don't know if you guys have heard of the conspiracy theories, but the conspiracy theories were essentially that he was forced to take that first retirement by the NBA because there was the idea that there was betting going on NBA games. Now, we don't know if that's true, but we know the NBA's had a gambling thing. So one of the big controversies in the early 2000s was the referee, Tim Donaghy, who actually did jail time in federal prison. So the NBA has done a very good job. And this is common knowledge, obviously. He did and very famously when the Lakers three-peated, when they beat Sacramento in Game 6, this referee who later went to jail found out that he was actually involved in betting on games, this was one of the games that he bet on, and the Lakers won Game 6. And there were some dodgy calls in that game. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. There's no evidence. David Stern, who was the commissioner at the time, has passed away now. So if he knew anything, if they had that kind of conversation, he's taken it to his grave. But I don't know.
So if we look at the documentary from maybe a coaching standpoint, the Last Dance, it highlighted lots of different types of personalities and characters within that Bulls team across the years. So there was obviously Pippen and Rodman, who kind of came across as Michael Jordan's right-hand men in a way, and then Steve Kerr's and the John Paxtons that were more sort of overachievers, and the likes of Bill Wennington, Horace Grant, Scott Burrell, all of these different types of characters. How important are all of these roles and personalities in building such an iconic and successful franchise ultimately?
I think it's critical. I think one thing that gets understated is even a small thing like a water boy can help a team achieve its ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. The 1%ers are so important. But more so than that, to me, the most compelling character in the whole doc was Phil Jackson. And I'm a huge fan too.
How important was his role in building that?
It was everything. To me, so there's two things. His ability to kind of internalize a team narrative was really special. So he had an ability to color the experience of all of the team in this kind of singular journey, despite having all these other bits. Because one of the things for me, especially now with the whole phenomenon in modern sports and in general, is positive psychology. Everything is positive psychology. Mm-hmm. To me, that's not been my experience of functional teams or great high-achieving teams. The great high-achieving teams are those which can take all of these different styles, like so can take a Jordan and his leadership style and combine it with someone like Dennis Rodman, who is quiet, doesn't do anything, wants to be left alone, but works really hard and is an example of that, with another guy like Scottie Pippen, who even to this day, essentially his behavior is someone who just felt underappreciated no matter what, being in this giant shadow of Michael Jordan. His entire being is kind of been defined by being Robin to Batman. So, taking all of those characters and making them feel comfortable enough to excel. Mm-hmm. Phil is the one who created that kind of narrative. And I think a team without a narrative with that level of different personalities and different leadership styles, with that much pressure, that much scrutiny, with all that was at stake, mm-hmm. without that, that narrative that Phil provided, I don't think the team functions. So I think it's so important.
So do you think a lesser coach would have, even with all of those stars, would have struggled to build such a successful team? Yeah. And we saw on that brief period when Michael Jordan went to play baseball, Scottie Pippen was given a more sort of leadership kind of role, but in a very different way. He was kind of almost like pushing the team from behind. How, if Michael Jordan, say, didn't return to basketball, how could you have seen that? Would that have been a long-lasting role for Pippen?
Yeah, I think they should have won a title that year. They didn't really cover it in the doc, but in Game 5 of that series against New York, where they lost, there was a really bad call made that kind of cost them that game and essentially cost them that series where they lost in Game 7. Mm-hmm. So, that year, Pippen had an unbelievable year, man. He had I think he was second in MVP voting that year to Hakeem Olajuwon. And Hakeem Olajuwon, those 2 years that Jordan was retired, won the title in both those years with the Rockets. And, as far as peak performance goes, Hakeem Olajuwon's peak performance those 2 years is stacks up against anyone ever. So Pippen only was second best in the league to that guy. I think Pippen was undersold a little bit in the doc as a whole, of just how great he was. Again, who knows in terms of, if Jordan definitely doesn't come back, how they reconstruct the team. They lost Horace Grant that second year as well, which made a big difference because he went to Orlando when the team was struggling when MJ came back sort of towards the end of that season. So